Greetings, my brothers and sisters. This is yours truly, Chrissy B here. Some people refer to me as Chrissy B Motep. Chrissy Manuel Bailey is my name. Some just refer to me as Chrissy B. I hope you can see me well out there because it's a bit dark. We're in a room that is, there's a light here, there's a light over there, but it's in general a bit dark in here. And plus we're shooting this in the night, so hopefully during the week we'll try and get more lighter locations because we've got a lot of subjects to cover, and this is where we speak about the wearing of the dreadlocks in accordance to Haile Selassie. Not every Rasta man wears dreadlocks. Some Rasta man wear dreadlocks. Dreadlocks is a declaration to the Rasta man wears his dreadlocks as a declaration to his God, which of course is Haile Selassie I of Ethiopia. Selassie wasn't a Rasta man himself. Selassie was a Christian. He believed in the Almighty God. He's God. And let's not forget that Haile Selassie has been from Ethiopia. Was also a Semitic. He had Jewish blood in him, and so he believed in Yeshua Christ, or Jesus Christ. As I always say, that there was no J in the alphabet for old Hebrew Jewish alphabet. The J came afterwards, but in ancient times, even before the Bible was recorded and was written, there was no J in the alphabet. They used the J. They used the Y for the J. If you look how some of those old Hebrew words were pronounced with a silent J, or it sounds like a Y, Yiddish Y. It's a Y. But in later years, the Jewish authorities incorporated the J into the alphabet, into the Hebrew alphabet. For Hebrews, the Hebrew language wasn't the first language either. The first language was, some say Amharic, which is from Ethiopia, of course the birth of Haile Selassie. Some say the natives in Kemet, which we refer to as Egypt, but it was called Cush in the Bible. But before the Bible, you had words of Kemet, Al-Kebalan, of course, which some of the people who await the Narapians, people from the Holy Cryptic Church, use that terminology, use that word Al-Kabalan to of course describe the whole landmass of Africa. You get some biblical scholars who refer to what it says in the Bible, especially in the book of Genesis, where it describes that particular land of Ethiopia as Cush. But you also have this, because let's not forget, all of Africa, all of that region was one nation. You have Ethiopia, some say Ethiopia, the Rastaman calls it Ethiopia. You also have Abyssinia, which was the name given to Ethiopia in the ancient times. And then of course the Greeks gave Ethiopia its name, which is very, very in use now. Ethiopia means the land of the blacks. The Greeks also gave Egypt its name. Egypt also means the land of the burnt faces. You see, so Egypt and Ethiopia were Greek languages, or Greek words. You see, all of that, as I said before, the name of Ethiopia and Egypt came onto the scene. You know, it was called Al-Kabalan, and of course Egypt was called Kemet, and Ethiopia was called Abyssinia. And of course, before the Greeks gave them the name, their respective names, it was Cush. And even you had Nubia, because Nubia was part of Egypt, is part of Upper Egypt. But because Nubia has been taken over by part of the Egyptians, the land is still there, but it's no longer called Nubia. It's incorporated into Egypt. Anyway, so we clear that up. So back to what we were talking about before, the whole subject about the Rasta man wearing his locks. It says in Corinthians, in the scriptures, about the man should not wear anything on his head. You see, because your hair is your crown in beauty, your crown in glory. You're going to look in the image of Yah, of the Almighty. Well, it's supposed to shave. The Rasta man, if you look at the Rasta man doesn't shave. The Rasta man lets his hair grow, his beard, his whiskers, his sideburns, his moustache, all of that grows, because he has to look in the image of the Almighty, which to them is Haile Selassie. If you look at Selassie, Selassie has his beard. Yeah, you know, he never once shaved. He had his beard, he grew his beard, and he had his hair. He wasn't a Rasta man, of course, even though his name was Rastafari. Because when he was born, he was named Rastafari Mekanen, or Ras Mekanen, like his father. His father was called Ras Mekanen. Ras means head in Ethiopia. It's like in the Indian, in the Hindu language, in the Hindu alphabet. Raj means king, it means head. So Raj and Ras is very, very similar. It's just a J and the S which is switched over. And so in Ethiopia, Ras means head. Rastafari means one to be feared. That's what his name means, and that's his name, Ras, head, yeah, to be feared. So King Selassie, when he was, of course, ascended to the throne in 1930 November, alongside Empress Menin, and alongside their children, which was a very, very symbolic moment. And you see on our Facebook pages, we post it all the time. That was a very, very symbolic message. And after that, that's how the Rastafari movement was born, because that was because Marcus Garvey prophesied about this coming of an African king. He wrote about it in the Philosophy and Opinion of Marcus Garvey. He also highlighted it in his book Race First, which is of course written by Dr. Tony Martin, of course, rest in peace, sir. He wrote that masterpiece, Marcus Garvey, and he told us to look out for the coming of a king. Look to the east. East is Africa. Look for the east for the coming of a king, coming of an African king, and that was Haile Selassie. You see, so he was prophesied about. He was the promised seed, as far as Marcus Garvey was concerned. Haile Selassie is not in the Bible, but he's the 225th descendant from King David. You see, King David is in the Bible. He's a descendant from King David. He's also a descendant from King Solomon, who was once the wisest man on earth. Because, you know, King Solomon asked Yah for rich, to have an obedient heart. He was being humble when he asked Yah, the Almighty, according to the Bible, for an obedient heart. And he received it. You see, he received many, many riches. He received many, many livestock, animals, house, everything. He was the richest man once upon a time in the whole wide world. And Haile Selassie is a relative of King Solomon, and of course of the Queen of Sheba, where Sheba means Queen of the South. Queen of Sheba means South. So Sheba from Yemen, which is very, very close to Ethiopia, as you can see in the map. You've got Ethiopia here, and you've got Yemen just here. Yemen was part of Arabia, because all of that region in the Middle East was called Arabia, you know. And then afterwards they got divided into states. So you had Oman, you had Yemen. Yemen was actually part of Ethiopia one time, because the Ethiopian Empire stretched forth into Arabia and stretched forth past the Red Sea into Yemen. And then because there's a relationship between the Yemenis and the Ethiopians, and of course of the Somalians, because all of that region was once all of Ethiopia. Then when the war came, and when Somalia was colonized by the Italians, you know, and then they broke away. Djibouti, you know, Eritrea, they were colonized by some French, some Italian, and so on and so forth. And that's why Menelik had to fight tooth and nail King Menelik II at the Battle of Adwa in 1896 there, which included Haile Selassie's father, Ras Mekanen. You know, he was part of the armies, King Menelik's armies, which fought the Battle of Adwa, the first Italo-Ethiopian war. And then the Italians got defeated by the Ethiopians, who were really, they had their armies were more in number, but they weren't as skilled as the Italians were. The Italians had state-of-the-art military and weaponry, and they still lost. And they even had to leave their weapons in the land of Ethiopia, because the Ethiopians actually totally destroyed them and won the war, and that prevented Ethiopia from being colonized. You know, and then some 40 years later, Selassie and Ethiopia were up against it again. This time with Mussolini from Italy, Benito Mussolini, Italian's fascist leader, and Selassie had to go into hiding in Jerusalem, Israel, and had to go and consult the British army to help him to fight the war, to ward off the Italians, and of course to take back possession of Ethiopia. And that's why Ethiopians have been colonized, you know, and one of only 2 African nations ever to be colonized. But let's not digress. Let's go back to what we were talking about. So yeah, so the locks is a signification of one's devotion to, they say Jah, which the Rasta man referred to Jah as Haile Selassie the first. You know, he's less. Of course, we just mentioned his conquering of the Italians. You see, also his ways, his methods. When he gave that speech to the United Nations in 1968, which Bob Marley used and put into his song called War. You know, about the significance of the colour of a man's eyes. If you don't take that on board, then you're going to have anarchy. You're going to have war. And that's what that Selassie, that speech he read out to the United Nations, and Bob Marley turned it into a song, you see. And that's one of the reasons why the Rastas, they hold on to him. When he got coronated in 1930, in Jamaica, you had a man called Martin Plano. He was very, very close to Bob Marley, and he started going around and spreading information and indoctrinating some of the young people in Jamaica about this new movement, this new, you know, king which has been, you know, ascended to the throne in Ethiopia, which Marcus Garvey prophesied about. And that's why a lot of the roots music comes out of Jamaica and comes out of course, from reggae music as a subgenre, because of this pronunciation of this king from Ethiopia, Selassie. And then, well, at that time, a lot of the would-be or the soon-to-be Rastas were Christians, because their parents were Christians. They grew up in the church. We all grew up in the church as black people. But when Selassie got ascended to the throne, it was a different thing, because this was a new movement now, and this was being prophesied about. Wasn't in the Bible, but it was prophesied about through Marcus Garvey's teachings from way back in the Philosophy and Opinions and Race First, and some of Marcus Garvey's publications, like the newspaper, the Whirlwind newspaper, which he'd set up, and it was written in there and it was spoken about in there. And people like Martin Plano and Leonard Percival Howell, in actual fact, Leonard Percival Howell was the first teacher about Rastafari. And he, as soon as 1930 came, he started going around Jamaica and lecturing about him, and mentioning about the you know, the coming of a king, and mentioning about the movement. I mean, Leonard Howell wasn't a Rasta, but the Rastafarian, the growing of the locks, came afterwards. In actual fact, the growing of the locks was there from a long time ago, because there's some peoples in Ethiopia, they wear their locks. You know, they're not Rastas, but they had this signification which came from the holy tablets. Let's not say the Holy Bible, because the Bible is a later thing. The Bible has only been written about 2,000 years, you know. But the holy tablets have been there for millions of years. I went to Egypt a few years ago, and I saw the holy tablets there, and I went into those tombs, and you had the inscribed, very, very similar to the hieroglyphics, and you had the symbols there of the animals and the symbols of the deities there, and the what we call the primary gods, you know, the gods in first preference, like Osiris, Horus, Isis, you know. Those are the primitive gods, and you have more priority gods at the top,